You need to know thousands of words to speak a language, but studying words could actually be ruining your language learning. I know, it seems counterintuitive. Knowing a huge amount of words is essential to speak a new language. And when you're starting out, if you could just know all the basic words in the language, then surely that means that you can understand more stuff and use those words when you speak. Well, as ever, it's never just that simple. So many people burn out when it comes to learning languages and don't ever see the results that they want. But by the end of this video, you'll know why studying words could actually be hurting your language learning, what you could be doing instead to make progress in any language that you want, and how a simple shift in your mindset will change how you approach learning new words. Oh, and why I'm wearing this really heavy backpack. But first, what could be so wrong with studying new words? Well, to answer that, I'll give you an example from my own learning. When I was learning Mandarin Chinese, I followed a system called the HSK system, which is the Hanyu Shuiping Kaoshi. Basically, it starts off at HSK1 with the easiest words and then adds more words at each level. Through sheer determination, I slogged through 1,200 flashcards to know supposedly the most used words of Chinese. Amazing. So I must have had an intermediate level of Chinese after all of that. Well, no. When I went to watch or listen to content, I struggled to understand what was going on. Yes, I would have needed more words in the long term, but even at content that was supposedly at my level, I was still missing something. The words I'd studied were in what I was hearing, but I couldn't recognize them when they were being used. I don't know how many hours I spent using flashcards, but the worst thing is, even the process to get there isn't enjoyable. It's like deciding that you're going to learn French one day and picking up a dictionary and starting at page 1. If you try to memorize a French to English dictionary, you wouldn't know French. Now, you might be able to pass an exam that involved testing your vocabulary, but that's not the same as actually knowing a language. That's why schools often have this whole process backwards. With my Chinese, it was only when I went back and listened to and read a lot of easier content that I could slowly start to increase my understanding. I was seeing and hearing the same words, but this time in context and in stories that I genuinely wanted to read or listen to. Now, full disclosure, I haven't done anything with my Chinese for ages, and so to try and remember it, I'll be doing what I'm going to share with you in this video. So, if you want to learn a new language, how long do you think it will take you? If you're not sure, I can confirm you're not going to get fluent in a month. If you find it takes you longer than you expected, don't worry, that's normal. The experts that I've spoken to on the channel have said it is the same process as it is for children, where we need thousands of hours of exposure to the language in order to pick it up. So if we start with the knowledge that it takes us a long time to pick up a language, then that will affect what we do to learn the language. It's the sort of thing that I discuss in my newsletter. Basically, if I'm going to pick up a language, I want to know how to make the process as enjoyable as possible so I can stick with it over the long term. Now, I don't know about you, but sitting down with lists of words or flashcard decks isn't how I want to spend hours of my life. Your time is the only thing that you can never get more of. That's a bit deep, but you get the point. Now, if you enjoy lists of vocabulary or flashcards, have a nice time and crack on. That is absolutely fine. But for those of you who aren't convinced, there is some good news, and it's got something to do with this bag. Also, note to self, don't wear a really heavy bag for the entire recording of a video. I like the one where I had to eat M&Ms. That was much nicer. Anyway, the good news. So let's say you're about to go on a journey and take this bag somewhere that is 2,000 hours away. Now, you can either drive a car there with this in the boot, that's trunk if you speak American. You can stop off whenever you want and enjoy the sights. Get a coffee on the way and treat yourself. Or you have to walk barefoot on this stony path for 2,000 hours whilst carrying this same heavy bag. You probably won't enjoy it even if you do really want to get to the destination. You're trying to do the same job, but one process is much more enjoyable. You're not silly, you're going to take the smooth road and get in the car. It's all about opportunity cost. We know from research that you can pick up a language without having to try and force your brain to do it. It happens without you realizing, providing that what you're exposed to is not too difficult for your current level. So if we know lots of exposure to the language works really well, it's kind of a no-brainer. Why would you take the path that's more painful? So this involves a bit of a shift in your mindset. If we come back to my experience of trying to learn Chinese, yes, I had learned quite a few words with the flashcards, but that was a very shallow sort of understanding. I could translate them word for word, but that's not the same as knowing another language. I knew them in a very shallow way, and we know that what matters is the depth of processing when it comes to learning vocabulary. What's more, there was no way at the time that I could spontaneously put those words together in meaningful sentences in order to chat to people. the same way that I can in English. What I did to fix this was to go back to read easier stories and dialogues and working to build my comprehension of those so that I finally got to the point that I could hold conversations with people. I was increasing the depth of those connections for each of the words that I knew because I was seeing the same vocabulary over and over again in the graded readers that I was using. They were being related to new stories, new characters, new situations, just like the same you have in English. Now, I'm not saying this is an either or, but remember the opportunity cost. You've only got so much time per day to do something with the language. I think you're better off deepening your implicit sense of the language rather than simply explicitly trying to memorize new stuff. There's no harm in doing both if you think it's sustainable for you and you enjoy it. These days it's even easier than ever to try and build up your natural sense of the language without having to study. For loads of languages now, there are videos on YouTube. Just type the language that you want to learn and comprehensible input. In most cases, that's probably all you need to get started, and in fact, that could be more than enough. For my Spanish, I started with that and slowly increased the difficulty of what I was listening to over time. So far, it's coming along nicely, to the point that I've moved away from stuff that is content for learners and I just watch and listen to stuff that's interesting to me. Which brings me on to my Chinese. So just watching YouTube videos in Chinese for learners is a great place to start. Now, the classic question people always ask is, what about the characters of Chinese? You can't hear a character, and if you don't know the character, you don't know the language. That is a very good point. So firstly, learning isolated characters isn't that helpful, I don't think. And I really hate flashcards. And I spend too much time looking at screens. So my plan is actually to get out a pen and paper, but to have a different approach to one that I've seen a lot of people use. There is something I enjoy about the tactile experience of copying out Chinese characters by hand. Now, it is interesting that although I feel that I can't remember all of my Chinese at the minute, I can still write out characters by hand that I learnt years ago, and it's also quite a relaxing thing to do if you're just doing it for fun. A teacher I once knew made students write out letters by hand to people that we knew. We didn't send them, but you get the point. At the time, it did seem like an odd thing to do, but it definitely worked to build a deeper connection with a character rather than just see it in a flashcard and then immediately move on. Going slow to go fast, if you will. Anyway, so what I often see is that people copy out one character and write it out like 20 times, for example. But that's basically a way of improving your handwriting, which is not my objective, although that's perfectly fine if you want to do that. You're paying attention to the stroke order, the layout of the character, and so that it looks a bit prettier and more standard, but the character's in isolation and therefore not of much use for me and what I want to do, to be honest. I'm not going to do it to have nice handwriting, but to make deeper connections again with those first 1200 characters, to not only aid my memory for the character, but also its meaning, because I'll be seeing it in context. If you're learning Chinese, you totally don't have to learn to write by hand. You can just type pinyin, which is the Romanized way of typing the language, and put that in your phone and copy out any characters that you need to. But language learning is about finding things that interest you, and to me this sounds like a nice little activity to do with a coffee every morning. By copying out Chinese text by hand, I plan on forming a deeper connection with the words and the grammar. I can then listen to the audio for those texts whilst I'm out with my dog, and slowly I'll be building up the Chinese I have in my head again. I can find stories that are about the right level for me, and so I can reinforce those same words. Alongside that, I'll probably start speaking at the same time and try and use those words in conversations with someone. I'm not trying to present to you the perfect way to learn a language, because quite frankly, there isn't one. Now, some people advocate trying to memorize the first couple of thousand words when you start learning a language, or doing thousands of closed sentence flashcards, and you can totally do that. There isn't one set way to learn a language, and there shouldn't be judgment on people that want to learn languages in a different way. Though, to save you some time, I will say memorizing vocabulary and grammar rules on their own won't necessarily help you acquire the language. If you did try to learn like that, you're destined to probably have a frustrating time like you did in school. Ultimately, it is your journey, and you need to find your own way to a degree by trying different things and seeing how they fit in with your lifestyle. Try different things, always see the language in context, and with consistency, you will get there. There is, though, one key mistake that can absolutely wreck any progress that you try and make. Check out this next video here to learn how to avoid it and how to keep making the progress that you want to.